talk about? What do people really want to know? What do people really want to know about weightlifting? What do people,
I
more
think
importantly, want to know about Josh Gibson? Should we do a
I
Josh
think
Gibson power hour this week?
I would like to not ever hear those words combined in a sentence again. Power Hour and
Yeah,
Josh
we're
Gibson,
we're just gonna do a full hour of me asking Josh questions as fast as I can.
and see how uncomfortable I get.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get anxious pretty quickly.
What?
Well, yeah.
Go
So
ahead.
to kind of kick this off, I think a really good way to actually start this is to talk about the platform that's going to be released in sub
Hmm.
2 weeks. So,
Yeah, hope
for,
so.
for people listening, the hundreds of people who are going to tune in and check this out, I think just giving some insight into what the product's going to be, what the process of getting on it is going to look like, and how people can use it and become involved as far as uh, using it to improve their coaching process.
Yeah. So, ugh, it's like very hard to explain all of the, without explaining like all of the things we've put together. You know, um, um, it's like we're just we're focused on building something that solves a lot of the problems that I ran into as a coach, especially doing a lot of remote coaching. Is just a platform that allows you to manage, your athletes, manage your training process, and something that is built around barbell sports, where you have a lot of, you know, let's say the spreadsheets, the Google Sheets, the WhatsApp, the Coach Now combos of piecing together a bunch of different apps and using those to, do all those things you need to do. Write a program, track results, deliver feedback, and communicate with your athletes. There's a bunch of products out there that exist that also try to do this, but none of them really do the job adequately for strength sports, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, they uh, they definitely just fall short in a lot of ways that are small and might seem kind of like, well, it's a workaround. I can kind of just do this thing or that thing that works fine. The problem is, in my experience, a lot of the benefit and a lot of the alpha in tracking training and doing these things, really well, or sorry, getting someone really good is in the little details. If you spend the time to hone in on someone's technique or spend the time to, address every rep, you're going to get better results. And it's the same thing
Right.
with coaching and with that process. If you track all the data, if you can look at the data, you evaluate it, um, you're going to get more high quality training in, and you're going to make better decisions across the whole spectrum of a training cycle. So the coaching platform, Coachlogik, is designed around the idea that coaches are going to benefit from having a platform that is dedicated to barbell sports training.
Yeah.
It does a great job of tracking data. It does a great job of connecting you with an athlete. It does a great job of giving you the ability to deliver high quality form checks and video feedback, with a built-in annotation tools. So it's this kind of like, you can think of it almost as like a virtual sort of gym where you can take your clients and put them through this, get all the data information you want, and then do something actionable with it, rather than just having, Google Sheet after Google Sheet. This is all integrated. So what you see in your data, you can immediately turn around and apply that to your training, right? To your training programs.
Yeah, I think it's tough because I understand how big of a deal this is and how much of a game changer it's going to be. I think it's hard to really grasp the breadth and depth of it. Um, but one thing I was kind of not struggling with this morning because I was programming before this for an hour, and a lot of it really is how do you keep all of the data aggregated in one place so you can reference it and use it to inform future programs or future decision making. And with Google Sheets, it's like every new program's basically a new document that's 12 to 25 sheets long or pages. And when you make a new one, it's like, okay, we're not starting over from scratch because we can reference it, but it's not easy to reference it internally. it's like everything's external. I'll go look at numbers, I'll look at values, I'll try to pull those and push those to the new plan, but it's kind of clumsy, and it's not like super well. It's not like a well-oiled machine, really, of being able to visualize it and use it and have it kind of integrated in a single space. And what it sounds like you're doing is effectively taking every single component of the coaching process and aggregating it into one space. Not only doing that, but making it a better version of what already exists in single spaces. So Coach Now, that's done. Google Sheets, that's done. All these like singular applications, they're not even as good doing their own thing as this singular product will be at doing everything. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. It's hard to what I found is it's hard to pitch this and explain what it is without going down these rabbit holes of talking about all the things we built. And I've talked to you about at length a lot of stuff. There is the amount of engineering that we put into this is ridiculous. Like, it's not just that we've built a new coaching platform. We've done a lot of stuff that has, in my opinion, been really groundbreaking is the wrong word, but like has been really unique in this space. To me, the biggest problem with a lot of what happens in coaching right now is that it's so like lowest common denominator or like a race to the bottom kind of effort in business, where you get coaches that will just continually, they just put out like a template program, and then most of what's being offered is just the sort of excitement of buying your favorite insert, person here, my favorite influencers program, or my favorite weightlifting guys program, or powerlifter, whoever it is. So it's like, it's very much geared around the business side of things, which is like build a brand, monetize the brand by selling a digital product. And to me, that's like it's just not interesting. I understand it, and it's kind of great from a business perspective for people, but it's just not high quality training. And it's not necessarily trying to do anything, unique or innovative in that space. And so, I find like, we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to just build some kind of like, another training app. Right. And we have weightlifting AI, and that again was like, that's a project focused on, trying to deliver better training more than anything else. Right. We could easily just write a bunch of, programs and put them on a Train Heroic or whatever and sell them. We've spent way too much money and time and effort on what we've done to just turn into that, So I'm super excited about it. It's hard to it's not hard. I want to make sure that what we deliver is we over deliver on what we're going to do. Right. I don't want to over promise things. I want to make sure that people's experience with the product is great, and that they find, a ton of value in it, and that they find it as a truly like beneficial tool for doing their job and building their business.
Yeah, that's super exciting. That's going to be kind of released during Nationals week. So if anyone who ends up listening to this is at Nationals, come talk to us, come hang out, and come check out the product.
Yeah, we're gonna have a booth at Nationals. I think, I don't know. USAW seems to be really slow to get back to me on these things, but we'll have a booth there, a table. We'll be up there doing a couple of demos of the product, but kind of just getting people aware of it and some interest in what it is, and then basically get ourselves to a point where we can show some stuff. Then we'll open up the beta. Probably the week after that, we'll start inviting people into the beta. And getting some coaches in there and getting their experience and their feedback. We'll do that for a period of time. And then after that beta, imagine it's between 4 and 6 weeks, just to make sure we can, really iron out a lot of stuff that, different browsers, how that works. There's just a lot of stuff we need to do on the technical side, but also on the just user experience side. then we'll open it up for, to everybody, for the public. So basically think about the product being live for anyone to buy around the Olympics. That's what I would say.
Okay, very exciting. So knowing that this is kind of a product that's been the culmination of, decades of coaching experience and remote coaching, but also in-person coaching, and pretty much being involved in every aspect of weightlifting and powerlifting as imaginable. The question I would pose that kind of sets up the topic of this conversation is, what have you really changed your mind on, or seen the biggest paradigm shift within your coaching practice, say over the last year, or 6 months, or few years? I don't know when you felt like things have started to change or the tides have started to turn. But have you had any paradigm shifts recently where you're like, oh, I would have coached much more effectively 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, last year, if I would be more cognizant of blank?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just getting to 10 years ago is a long time. So I would say 10 years ago, a lot of it would have been being more focused on surrounding myself with people that are closely tied to research. I didn't do a lot of that when I was starting, because it was always that's just for whatever nerds. I'm gonna squat, I'm gonna lift heavy. I would have said that would have been smarter then. I mean, I wasn't against it. I just was always just trained hard. I think that, putting yourself in that position where you have a lot of people that are connected to it, like yourself, or people that are well versed in research, because there's a lot to be learned from taking that information and trying to apply it to, your own training process. I would also say just any kind of any shift I've had is probably more so related to just an execution thing versus a total broad knowledge thing. It's just I would have focused on tracking my training way earlier, actually writing down what I do. I mean, it's almost silly to not do that. I mean, you would never think about being successful with a diet by just doing it intuitively. I mean, people do, but it's that's, if you track how much you eat and what you eat, it makes doing that thing very easy to control, right?
I think it's I think to draw another comparison or analogy for that, it's almost like someone drops you off somewhere and you don't know where you're at, and you find your way home, but you don't map it out, and then someone else, they drop you off again, and you're like, I don't know how the fuck I got back. And then it's every single time you do it, it's a new process of figuring it out. And you learn a lot because you tend to pick up signs and tend to become more familiar with the process. But it's if you would have written it down the first time, you could have iterated on that process. But if you never write anything down or track anything, you're just kind of trusting blind faith that it's close enough or right enough or correct. And that's, we're kind of we're really reliant on, one of my favorite quotes when talking about the brain is, you're reliant on an organ that misunderstands itself. So without data, without concrete information, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
So
I 100%. I think that's a great analogy, right? Yeah. I would have just been more focused on that, actually doing the things that I was doing better and taking more care in them.
Yeah.
What about you?
No, yeah. I mean, I would say that's true. It's largely an execution thing, catching up to semantic knowledge thing, right? Because I felt you read, weightlifting is so just, it changes at a glacial pace, and that's why the Coachlogik coaching platform is so massive, right? Is weightlifting super stagnant, to where what are you getting that's new in weightlifting? It's get your knees back, stay over the bar, don't burn someone's clock in a C session, that's the information coming out.
I don't have that rule. Everybody is my enemy. Everybody has money. Even more so in the C-session. Those people need to be put in their place.
You ever heard of eugenics, Max?
I've got a 109 plus C-session lifter opening the snatch at 75. If you're in my fucking way, you're going down.
You're getting steamrolled. But like the point is, like, the information coming out that's supposed to inform you on weightlifting coaching is don't burn clocks in this session, why you should move your feet. And it's just, that's, you get that day one. Like when you get into weightlifting, like, you just know that's the case, and nothing seems to really ever change. And a lot of that, to paint another comparison or another picture, is with COVID. The reason why vaccinations were pushed so fast is because of the allocation of resources, time, and manpower. And if we think of manpower as a resource along with money and et cetera, like, people were saying, this is very important. We're going to push every single thing we have toward it. And vaccinations were developed so quickly, your head's going to spin thinking about it. In weightlifting, very, very little resources, very little manpower, very little interest. And what you basically get is this just like bubble where people just operate in it to make money and exist in it. But there's no one kind of coming in and out. Coming in from the standpoint of like, oh, here's a rigorous process of testing and understanding, or coming from the inside out and saying, oh, this is what we do. Can we test that? Can we understand it better? Can we actually see if it's doing what we want it to do or is supposed to do? So you don't get a lot of groundbreaking ideas. And with the Coachlogik platform, this is going to revolutionize coaching. I mean, like, realistically, because it's taking, all of the information we understand and know to be true, all the semantic knowledge, all of the, like, book stuff, all the lived experience of you coaching and us coaching, and understanding it and applying it into the most up-to-date technology or software possible, and then giving you something that's like, okay, you can't execute on your own. You're not going to be able to, because you're just fallible and you're a person and you're a single unit. Here's a platform by which you can do that better.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I think the biggest thing that is a limiting factor for a lot of coaches is there's not most people too, it's like there's not a payoff for doing certain things. So it's like you can get by just delivering some degree of, hey, here's a program, do it, awesome. And maybe you get a bunch of newer people and they do really well. So there's a definite, like, why would I bother adding to that? Why would I bother making my life harder, right? So, things like tracking training and like analyzing performances and doing these things, like the analytical side of it is sort of like, what's the point if somebody can't even do a back squat properly or do a snatch properly? And I think it's the other way around, is that, people try to focus so much on like what's immediately in front of them, and they miss the fact that the more they develop the process around it, the easier all the other stuff becomes. It's like if you had no teaching progression for the lifts, snatch or clean and jerk, every single time you teach somebody, it's going to be a new thing, and you might try something different every single time. But if you had like a checklist and you have like, hey, here's, whatever my official 10-step or 5-step process to do the lifts, and you just go through it every time, eventually you refine that more and more. And then you start, maybe skipping a step, or you delete a step out of that process and you become better at it. Or you learn, hey, it's a better cue to say this, or, somebody who struggles with this thing, I tried this other drill and that works better. So that process of becoming less, like you said, one-off, it lost in the woods, find your way home, and more, okay, I'm going to, I know that I always go north, and then I, go across the stream, I go down the mountain, I always go towards the lowest point. That's how you never get lost when you're in a place where you're unsure of what's going on. So I do think it's the opposite. It's that very much the more you build a system or have a systematic process to what you do, the better everything gets. And this works even in business, probably more so in business than anything else. The faster you're able to do your job and to the better, to the faster you can do it and to the higher quality you can deliver, the better you're going to be. You can scale that way. You can grow your business in ways that are more sustainable, that you reduce churn. So I think it's like this kind of funny thing that like people will just kind of wing things like, I'll just get it done and that works for now. And then that just becomes the process for 10 years. And I saw that in our gym. We started our gym. It was like over and over and over again. It was just like doing the same things again and again. And like,
right.
Just kind of like floundering for it. And then like we'd run a competition and you run one meet and you're like, just make it happen. Just run around, scrambling around, get chairs, get this, get that, and then like you throw it together. And that's cool. If you do one meet, that's fine. If you're going to do a meet every year, every 6 months, like you should just have a checklist, a punch card of like these 20 things get done on this day, and there it is. And then you can refine that. You can add or remove something. It makes that process way less work, way less effort. And that all that stuff trickles down into the end result being either you doing a better job and being more proud of that, or you scaling a business or whatever it is, growing your team. So, a huge part of this stuff, like kind of going back to the what would I do different, or what my epiphany is, like just understanding that being good at something or doing something one time well is not the same as building a systematic approach to it, where you have answers to questions, you have all these kinds of things that, basically can get you so much further with so much less effort because you've systematized them.
Yeah, I would say on top of that, I thought that was all great. I mean, I had thoughts just constantly coming up about what you're saying. And I think a big one was there's this like ability to easily become comfortable with, well, that's just how that person's going to lift. That's just how they're going to squat. That's their technique. That's their capacity. That's their ceiling. And I think, quality we both have, and I think to some extent it's a double-edged sword, is I always think there's something beyond what I'm able to help someone do, in the sense of I can coach you to this, but you probably have more in the tank. And there's always that extra that you're like unsure of, but if you just dial things in, you can get them there. And I think like that's a good quality to have as a coach. You always want to think like your potential is much higher than where you're at. We just have to do a better job. We have to execute better. We have to understand the training process better. And if we do that, we can make a bigger PR or a better PR. It's a quote John Marcus from the On Coaching podcast. It's a fire that can heat the house and it can also burn it down, because you're always pushing and always searching, and you can never really feel, I don't want to say satisfied, but happy or content with what you've done, because it's like you're always in the space of we've left kilos on the table. And even when you have a perfect performance, it's like, could I have made a better call? Could I have timed this warm up better? And I think what that tends to do is it removes chance and the unknowable stuff out of the equation, and it says, what do I have control over? Can I do a better job at managing that? So that's kind of how I look at it. And when you look at it in that way, it really always is this like battle of attrition with execution of, can we create a better process? And I've said this for a long time now, and I think it's changed slightly, but when I first got into being a content creator for weightlifting, it was like largely theory backed. Like I kind of mentioned, reading Brad Schoenfeld's Muscle Hypertrophy book, and Dr. Stone's Principles and Practice of Resistance Training, and like just really deep diving on a lot of the training theory. And then I would talk about it. I never really understood it, and I could never really contextualize it and put it into practice. Like, oh yeah, for like a specific block, you're gonna 3 to 5 weeks, blah blah blah. But there wasn't that like lived experience of doing it and doing it well. And now I'm kind of more in that space of I can apply theory heavily, and I can manipulate it as I need to. And you realize it's not like another kind of way of talking about it is it's not written in pen, it's written in pencil, or written in Jello, or it's a flexible process. and that's kind of how people mischaracterize periodization, which, is something we kind of talk about in the Clean and Jerk book that will hopefully be released soon. But it's this flexible process. You take all the theory, you take your best guesses, you apply it over time systematically, and then you see what the result is and you iterate. And having the framework or the platform to do that, I mean, I don't know how that couldn't just completely change coaching practice. Like now you can actually
Yeah.
collect, collate, and use data correctly.
Yeah. The other element of a lot of this is that with tools, there are more tools now to do things that we couldn't have done before. So there's a lot of like really powerful, really capable, AI models and machine learning techniques that could be used to help us do things that are solve problems or give us answers to problems that are not deterministic, right? And so a deterministic sort of system is something where a plus b equals c, right? And every time a plus b is going to equal c. But in training, that's not always the case. To a large degree, it's somewhat like that, but in a lot of cases, you can have so many variables that when last week a plus b equals c, this week a plus b is not quite equaling c, right? We can build systems around the logic and intelligence we have around training and use more powerful tools to sort of give us better answers or build us better better training programs or whatever it is. So that to me is really exciting because I feel like that's something where in the next few years 100% there are going to be ridiculous software apparatuses that exist that are just going to be like sort of mind-blowing, right? We're already kind of there. I mean, if you look at some of the AI models that exist and some of the AI software that exists, it's pretty staggering what it can do, and this is a very early stage, right? And you can only just sort of in your mind imagine and extrapolate what that's all going to happen, what that's all going to be later on. But I see it as like, why are we not trying to do this? I remember talking to and seeing, I think Spencer was, Spencer collected all this velocity data. And then I remember listening to him at one point kind of say like, well, he doesn't really do a lot with it because he has all his data. To me, it's like, what's the point of collecting it? And maybe he's changed that. Maybe he's doing more. Maybe that's just a time. But it's like, that's not, people keep training logs all the time, right? We see these everywhere. Everyone's writing down their training. How many times do you think people are actually looking back at the training in their logs
Totally.
and like drawing some conclusion from it? I see it as like, man, wouldn't it be great if we just had everyone's training logs and we could draw all sorts of interesting data out of it and then share that with everybody and say, hey, here's things we're finding. Maybe those answers are very basic and they're not going to further the sport, but if we don't even try or attempt to do it, we'll never get anything out of it. Also feel like there's a lot to be done from new technology standpoints where we can be integrating things that can help us understand the lifts better, but also help us teach them better and coach them better and deliver the highest quality kind of feedback and coaching we can. And if we're not trying to build that machine and take advantage of it for our sport, then it'll exist at some point. Someone's going to do it, whether they intend to or not. There's enough weightlifting data on the internet that these large language models and large video models will eventually assimilate that. Don't think that in 5 years there won't be the ability to just shit out content videos like we do now, like a person does now, or be able to analyze a video of a snatch or clean and jerk. It will happen, right? So I see it as, how do we not get swept up in this thing of, over time, someone's going to have some incredibly intelligent models that will potentially do what we're doing now, but we don't benefit from it at all, right? So that's the other side of this, is like making sure that we can solidify and sort of bring this kind of coaching process and coaching into
Yeah.
the next generation of technology that exists, right? If you think about sorry, what were you gonna say?
Yeah. I almost wonder though if people really want, not if people want it, but if there's going to be an initial resistance to it. Because, I talked to Aaron Kunanen and he kind of showed me what they're doing with the Reds. And it's like the level of technology and
Yeah.
the money and the resources and the capability of what they're doing. It's purely because of resources. It's they have the people who can manage it and use it and operate it. They also have the money to put toward it, and then they create a facility where they can put in, markerless motion capture, and they can watch every single pitch in extreme detail, and they can say that was a hit, but it was a perfect pitch. It wasn't because it was
Mhm.
a bad pitch. So you're not off. You're not. We're not gonna. I don't know how they necessarily use it or communicate it, but it's like to that level. Um, where they can infer like, and I don't know in weightlifting if you do this, but it's like that was a perfect lift. This ended up happening because of whatever reasons.
Mhm.
Um, but there's like this resistance, one, because no one's doing it, like bringing that technology or bringing that level of sophistication to weightlifting. But when they do, it's kind of met with this like, don't overthink it. Don't impose methods on people. Don't impose rigid frameworks on people. Don't have such a rigid process. And you see this all the time because people will say, it's about the relationships and the people. It's not about the programs, which is just patently false. You're not going to talk someone sweetly into doing a snatch correctly because you have a good relationship with them. It's like, yeah, they'll carry out the program, but a good relationship isn't going to patch up a really really shitty teaching progression or program,
Yeah.
regardless of how you want to spin it. Like, there's no world in which I can tell you, hey, you're doing a great job, keep it up, and that imposes mechanical stress on your muscles and you get bigger. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no world that exists where those two things are compatible. So this like dichotomy and this just black and white thinking of, well, it's about, people, athlete or person centered coaching. That's entirely true. It's also about the fucking program. It's about coaching correctly and properly and like effectively. And that's largely having the correct dosage and formulation of stress while the person can be engaged and, interested and bought into the process. And I'm not saying that it's like only about the physical, only about the mechanical. It's like, yeah, but it's not about one or the other entirely, or it's not this like throw the baby out with the bathwater. Because you're rigid or because you write programs like this, that means it's just bad. It's got to be, you know, it's got to be
Yeah.
more, decided on the person.
The thing I would say to sort of give perspective to what you just talked about, which is this idea that new technology emerges and people are resistant and it doesn't catch on. And maybe that's not exactly what you're saying, but to a degree, it's kind of like
Yeah, it's basically, yeah.
15 years ago, how many videos of snatches do you think existed in the entire world?
No,
Right?
I mean,
As soon
very,
as
very few.
right. So cell phones come around, and then it becomes like, oh, it's weird. I remember this is sort of a tangent. Travis Cooper told me a story once about the first time at the OTC that he wore, it was him or somebody showed up wearing tights. And everyone was like kind of giggling at them, like, oh, you're wearing tights. That's so funny. Like, right. And now everybody wears them, right? It's just a normal thing. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, there wasn't the ability to film your lifts on a phone and have access to see that over and over again. Now it's like the most common thing in the world. When my first coach, Goff, started coaching people, he did remote coaching through email and phone calls. He didn't call it remote coaching. He was just like, I'm helping this kid down in Texas or whatever. I'm helping this guy because there was like 9 people doing weightlifting. You know, and so like, that makes sense. There's always another generation coming up. What you and I do and where we are in our careers or in our spectrum of weightlifting is, in 10 years there'll be a completely new generation of people. right?
Yep.
Everything expires, right? They continually turn over. And so the point being, like, what someone resists, the early adopters will always exist, and the early adopters turn into the incumbents that are sitting there down the road saying, well, yeah, video all your lifts. Like, you got to video your lifts and show me as a coach, or send me your text, like text me in your workout. So all of this technology will 100%, I guarantee, all of the new technology that exists that gets implemented or integrated into sport, into this process, will stick around. Not necessarily every piece of technology. There might be some whatever software shit that it stops doing what it needs to, or isn't good enough, or gets changed. But like, there will no longer be a day where people are not necessarily videoing their lifts. It's just too much ingrained in it. It's too useful. And so what you're going to end up with is, at some point, as tools become more and more powerful and more capable, they just find their way into places. And they do that because they're useful. So if you have something that is useful and you have something that is capable, it's just going to find its way in. And it's like, you're going to have some coach. I mean, think about this. How many coaches do you know of right now that have like either purchased force plates or use force plates in their gym? I mean,
a surprising amount.
Right. I can think of like,
but in the thing is, just getting a bird's eye view of it, and having done isometric pull testing and having done counter movement jump and static jump testing, I watch people set up for the isometric mid-thigh pull, and it's so incorrect. And it's one of those things where, like, should I just comment and say, like, there's a paper from Greg Hoff, and it's like 125 degrees at the knee and whatever at the hip, and like, it just, they don't want to hear that. They probably don't care, and it's like, so there's like this adoption of technology, and then there's the people who are experts using the technology, right?
Sure.
Because it's like everyone used a knife, but a knife, everyone's used a knife, but it's like, to use it as a scalpel takes an expertise. To use a sharp blade to serve multiple purposes takes an expertise on top of that. You can't just have the tool and say, I'm a surgeon, right?
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, like, the technology will be there. Whether people use it well or not is always going to be up to them. But yeah, it's a great example. Like, force plates, in my opinion, I think you might agree, I don't know, it's like pointless in my mind. Like, I just don't see the value in it, because it's like, I think it's a neat thing and it's cool, but it's almost more of just one of those like ornamental things. Like, we've got force plates and we're doing stuff with it, but it's like, you probably don't really get a whole lot out of it in the grand scheme of things. You're going to get a lot of like corroborative evidence saying, like, yeah, we kind of know, hey, these guys are stronger, or we got them stronger because we did lots of strength work. We could tell that also because their 3-rep max deadlift went up. And maybe I'm misunderstanding. I'd love to get an opinion from somebody, but I think the reality is that there's a definite, in all of sports, anything that's competitive, there's always going to be a pursuit of an advantage, a pursuit of some edge of something. So as those things become available and they become even marginally capable, people will adopt them. And then the next generation sees it as like, oh shit, like, when I lifted, we didn't film anything. We didn't have cameras really good enough available. I mean, there was one day we filmed stuff, and it was with like a VHS, and it was in like a garage, and it was like, we got like, 7 lifts on the video, and we like play it back and watch it. And it was like cool to see ourselves. But it's like, now it's like, you're not videoing most of your lifts and looking at them or sending them to somebody, like, and that'll just become even more to that degree. Really what I'm saying is, all this is getting to the point where coaches need to be wearing VR goggles at all times, and they're going to have some kind of augmented reality. Like,
well, that was a good lift. It's like, coach, you were looking the other way.
I really hope at nationals one year we show up and every coach has like the Apple like goggles on, and they're like with the fake eyes though. It's the goggles with the fake eyes.
So the thought is the technology becomes so advanced, it can play out probabilities so well you don't even have to do the competition. It's like, we know exactly what you're going to do. We know how that's going to end. You lost. It's like, we're just going to crown the champion. We don't have to play. So you just show up for nationals. You like put a coin into a machine, and then it spits out the result.
you go to nationals, and nationals is just a dynamometer. So you grab it, and you found that the highest correlation is grip strength. You show up, and so you squeeze it, and you're like, nope, you lost.
There,
It's like
there are a lot, yeah, there are a lot of great things you said that I'd touch on, and I think one is, I mean, part of this is when I first started getting into health and fitness, I was adamantly against if it fits your macros. I was like, there's no way an
yeah,
apple is better than a cookie. Like, isn't better than a cookie. And
right.
Ian McCarthy was in the YouTube comment section on this video, like, you're a fucking idiot, basically. Like we're not comparing apples to cookies, like, because and again, it's just like this kind of misunderstanding of what is attempting to be done. And with if it fits your macros, it's this idea of energy balance is the key principle or the premier principle that determines weight loss and weight gain.
Yeah,
Now, there's a lot of stuff behind it. There's like a lot of stuff that also matters for health, and there's a lot of like environmental and genetic factors. But at the end of the day, it's an energy equation, and if you don't understand that, you're just going to argue until you're blue in the face. And I think what we're ultimately trying to get at is how do we develop a coaching process? How do we improve your ability to coach through the collection of data, through being able to communicate with athletes more readily, being able to effectively do this all in one place and analyze lifts and slow them and like do all of these things, have all these features. It's not to say like we're trying to make coaching something. No, it's like we're trying to standardize the process by which coaching occurs.
yeah.
And I think, about that idea of like early and late adopters, we can sit here and say like, people just don't trust science, or they don't trust technology, or they don't trust like new ways of doing things because old ways work. It's like, the germ theory of disease was kind of resisted. It wasn't taken up immediately when people were like, okay, so in maternity wards, like people are basically like delivering delivering babies without sanitizing, seeing a ton of deaths. It's like, oh, we should probably do something about that. It's like, even after that, people were still going into wounds, raw dogging them. Like, there's a story in a great like clinical medicine podcast I was listening to with, I think it was one of the presidents. There was an attempted assassination. He had the bullet in him, and like they were really fascinated, interested in like, we have to get the bullet out. So all of the physicians who came in to inspect it would put their fingers into the wounds and like feel around without gloves, without sanitizing. Um, and the germ theory of disease was like already established prior to that. So it's like, even with something so life changing, literally life changing as this germ theory of disease, people still didn't take it up readily or quickly. So I think, not to compare Coachlogik to the germ theory of disease, but what I am comparing it to is this idea of there's a revolution or a paradigm shift. It's not a one-to-one. There's a paradigm shift and then paradigm change, but it's like, get people on board, get them understanding, get them using, and then it'll proliferate and reach that tipping point where, yeah, now most people are going to do it because it is the best path forward.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't have said any better than you did. President's bullet hole getting fingered by doctors is exactly what was on my mind. When I give the pitch it's like when when the president was getting fingered, and then, but like with coaching, but all online.
I think there are websites for that, Max.
Sir, are you selling an OnlyFans subscription? No, but yeah, it's like, I mean, a lot of this goes to say that I think the thing about a lot of this, none of this has actually been us talking about weightlifting training or coaching, but the idea, I do think it's valuable to talk about the idea that like what can you pull into the process of training and coaching people that is valuable, that comes from outside of the sort of tight circle of like, knowing how to program, knowing how to coach, knowing how to like, do weightlifting in and of itself. How can you pull tools in that can improve any one of those aspects, or just help you augment the entirety of it? The other side of this whole thing is, to me, the most foundational element of good coaching is about having stability as a person, right?
Yeah.
Having a stable income and a stable job and a place to do this.
Totally.
And so a huge part of the product and what we're doing is also about, like this whole coach mentorship process is helping coaches become better coaches so they can attract more talented athletes and bring in bigger groups of people because they can showcase what they've done. I think it's a lot easier to sell your coaching services if you can show that you've done, you prove that you can get somebody to a high level. And then on top of that as well, it's like just building the sort of processes that are important for running a business successfully, management of all of your things, the ability to deliver a high quality product over and over and over again and not make mistakes, like not miss out on delivering feedback or forget to write programs or all these things. So there's a huge part of like the business aspect, which helps coaches create a stable foundation for doing the thing they want to do, which is actually coaching people. Totally. Right. So yeah,
well, I think and a lot of the issues with scaling and marketing and all these things is you don't have a process, you don't have the ability to execute and do that repeatedly. And it's like, what does this do? It standardizes everything, so you can effectively have all of your T's crossed and your I's dotted, so that it comes down to coaching and coaching prowess. And that's what athletics is about. It's like knowing that everyone's going to have force plates, everyone's going to have motion, like markerless motion capture, everyone's going to have all these technologies. Who can use them better? Who can use them most effectively? And that's kind of the point. The point is to standardize and level the playing field and say, like, everyone can make it. Everyone can coach really, really well. Everyone can develop athletes. Everyone can make a lot of money. But the thing is, like, you have to be willing to accept that the way you're doing it currently isn't the best way to do it. And that sucks. It's like, okay, I'm not doing the best job I can. I circle back to the earlier part of this call where we were talking about kind of this idea of like thinking that someone's potential is always slightly beyond where they're at. It's the same with this coaching process. It's like, I can always do a better job. This is like a slap in the face, like a Mike Tyson over the top. Here's a better platform, better way to execute and coach.
Yeah. There's a lot we've done. I'm super excited about it. I think it's going to be really cool. I think it's going to be a very cool thing for a lot of people. I think the other element of this, not to sort of turn this into a big sales pitch, but like, the other element here is that we have a lot of experience. I have a lot of experience having done a lot of this stuff, coaching, remote coaching, all these things. The ability to create a platform, a software platform that can extend from a single user who just wants to do training themselves and log that stuff, all the way to a person who wants to coach, or send 2,000 people a program. It's extensible from the far end of the tail to the big end, right? You can get everything in there, from one user doing one thing themselves all the way up to this, like, massive, whatever, you have a giant team or something. But also the ability that, like, we have the ability now to actually iterate on something at a really fast pace. We have a great software team. We've got a great development team. We've got a great group of people that we can do a lot of these things. So the product will fit to this community super well, which makes me excited. That's just from like my perspective. Like, I'm excited that we can get a bunch of negative feedback and then, and do something with that, versus just like, well, that's what we got. So,
yeah, and I've seen it. Like, it's sleek. I mean, like, every part of this is like refined and just constantly worked on. It's not just like a kind of haphazardly thrown together product. It's not like something where like pennies go into it and it's like minimum effective product or minimum viable product. It's like, no, this is it's literally a game changer entirely. And it's one of those things where it's almost like, normally you get a present on Christmas Day, you open it, you look at it, you kind of move it around a little bit, you're like, oh, that's really neat, and then you set it down. This is something where when you open it up, you're going to be there for about 10 years trying to understand it and figure it out.
Well, Hopefully not 10 years trying to understand it. That would be a
Well,
massive
we want
failure.
everyone to just die in their chairs so that they can't cancel their subscription.
Yeah, you can't cancel. That's the one thing about it. It's just once the credit card's in, did I tell you that's the whole business model is you can't cancel. It's like a timeshare. I think legally, like some timeshares can be passed on to your kids, so the debt is it's like forever. So we went with that model.
Yeah, your kid's gonna be like, "What's this app that's just always on my phone?"
Be at your funeral. Josh Gibson was a good man. He was a good coach, but man, that subscription product just ate him from the inside out.
Yeah, but at least you can see the analytics of my life.
Oh yeah, no, it was all just a downhill graph after 30.
Linear regression. Yeah, take weight off the bar every week. We do have a couple programming questions.
Yes, let's actually answer some real questions for people.
We have a comment from Brian, which I saw Brian in Seattle recently. It was great catching up. Beautiful biceps, really sweet man. He says, "How far do you want to push the technology of the app? So far, where an in-person coach or a coach at all isn't really needed anymore, like an ultimate end goal. I would think that's akin to like the Turing test, where it's like you start using the Coachlogik platform and it's coaching you, and you're like, I really don't know if this is Max Ada or if it's the platform itself, the technology. The only way to really distinguish the two is the platform would give you good coaching advice. And if it were Max, you just get braided. So I think, are we ever going to get to a place where that could happen?
We could do that already. So I think of it like this. It's not actually us that's driving the technology forward. We're a business with very specialized, specific knowledge and very specific domain knowledge, and a business model and a business logic. We've built software that allows us to be agnostic to, models, AI models. So as a company like, OpenAI releases a new model that they've trained, that they've spent billions of dollars building, and it has greater capability than the other models out there or whatever, we can, because our software is agnostic to the model, meaning we're not built on top of a model. We just use these models, some models, to do certain things in the app. So we can capitalize on that. The thing that will determine to what degree this becomes something, whatever, to what it grows into is just whatever these other much larger companies develop and allow us access to. So it's like the inevitability is that's coming. We can't even stop that. We can't if Sam Altman and OpenAI decide to build a digital god, I mean, we're not going to stop it. We just want to.
What I hear, and this is kind of what I've always been thinking, and this is ultimately what I was getting at with this belief system of it's science or it's good coaching. It's not both. It's it's right. This rigid logical thinking, or it's being in touch with a person. Science is agnostic to your belief system. I mean, it's a process of understanding the physical world and having information by which you can form future decision making. The information is going to exist whether or not you want to acknowledge it. And if we can put more resources into it, we can better understand training. Yeah. With the technology, it's like we're so behind in weightlifting because there aren't any resources in it, that the gap, that chasm between where weightlifting is and where technology is, it's so big that it's like asking these really basic questions, not basic, but elementary questions like this, when in reality, this happens in so many different industries. It's just they have the capital to do it. And it's one of the reasons why no one will ever do anything close to Coachlogik or a similar platform in weightlifting, is no one's got the resources, the capability intellectually or lifestyle wise to do it, to reproduce it. No one will do this again in weightlifting. I truly believe that. And I think it's attempting to close that gap between current technology and weightlifting, powerlifting, S&C, sport performance, coaching, right? It's attempting to close that gap between coaching and technology.
Yeah, and that's it. The thing to give a more specific answer, what we've seen from like the trend of all the AI models that are, especially with LLMs, is like the trend is very much moving towards like digital agents, digital assistants, right?
Yep.
And that's very much what a coach is, right? And not a digital, but like a coach is a person who's, either in real time telling you what to do on the next set or the next rep. We've seen like, once like large video models start to exist where the AI can understand what's happening in a video, in a very general sense, and then can be fine tuned, and that can be done in real time. There's no reason why you wouldn't see a product that exists where you set your camera up and it just runs, and you have a headphone in and you do a lift and it tells you what to do in the next rep. It gives you a cue and it says, do this, do that. I mean, the speed is already there with images. We've seen demos of models actually like operating with still imagery and telling you about what's happening, when it's looking at you and it's in real time. That'll only get faster and more capable, and eventually you're just going to have this AI assistant that exists. It just needs to understand snatch, to clean and jerk.
Yeah, and it's so simple. And when you think about like the extent to which technology, like unbelievable technology exists, I use this example because I remember seeing it in a textbook. There was a petri dish with a kidney growing in it, and it's like if you can basically grow an organ in a petri dish, like why would coaching not be able to be done by some sort of technology? I mean, I just like I think people are so, and that's where we come back to like this not growth mindset, but this like expansive mindset of what currently exists. It's like we basically unearthed the idea or the process of evolution by natural selection. Like that was unearthed through like inquiry and the scientific process. It's like you don't think we can fucking tell you how many sets and reps to do and like where your pull's at and like what the errors are. Like, I mean, those are so rudimentary that I'd like my interest, and I don't know if you're there with me, Max. I guess a lot of your like intellectual bandwidth has been put towards developing this, but it's like my interest reached so far beyond just are we going to do snatches on Monday or are we going to do clean and jerks on Monday? It's like those are so uninteresting at this point. It's like I want to know the perfect way to get this person better or the best way possible.
A lot of it is about the ability for a system or a tool to give you guidance to the next day. I think Eric Helm says it best, which is like, what are you supposed to do next Tuesday? And that's context dependent. And so building systems and technology that allow us to extract better answers from the contextual information we have is what we're looking for. Because you can write the perfect program. There's a million perfect programs. Everyone's program's perfect when it was written. As soon as it was instantiated and done, it sucked, right? So it's like the perfect program already exists.
Went down.
Yeah, it's about the developing an exceptional execution, exceptional process. That's what drives people forward. That's what makes progress and what makes things really good.
And the only way you can do that is by knowing what you did. I mean,
knowing what you did and knowing how you're probably going to respond, right?
Well, yeah, and I mean that like if you don't have some sort of data storage, like you can rely on memory, but we know how faulty memory is. I mean, every time you retrieve a memory, you change it because you're having to access the same pathways. Through accessing them, you change them. So it's like that Heraclitus quote of "You can't step in the same river twice." I think it applies perfectly, and that's just true with everything. So it's like if you can't really accurately and effectively collect and use data, it's just, I mean, you're never going to be the best coach you can be. So we have one last question. Let's see if we can wrap this up in 60 seconds, Max. This is from Mark S. He says, I'd rather have a programming specific question. How do you efficiently calculate intensity from volume and weight? What would be a rule of thumb? How to adjust it during different phases?
What was the question?
You're joking, right?
No, you cut out.
That's funny. I'd rather have a programming specific question. How do you efficiently calculate intensity from volume and weight? What would be a rule of thumb? How to adjust it during the different phases?
How do you calculate intensity and volume from weight?
Yeah, I
Am I
think
hearing
I
it
don't know
right?
if he means intensity like difficulty. I think he might mean like average, like some sort of average intensity from sets, reps, and load, or if you're looking at
Oh, oh, oh.
uh,
Okay. Not how do you plan it? How do you calculate it?
yeah, yeah,
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I would say that the most important variables are just the average intensity. So take, the sum of all of your training volume and, so all of your sets and reps combined, and then find the average weight of the barbell in those exercises. That's
mm,
like the first layer is just like, what is the average intensity you're training the snatch with or the clean and jerk with? The next two things I think are that give more context to this. One is, what is the distribution of that volume across, let's say a month or a week or whatever. That gives you a better sort of snapshot into what that volume looks like. So if you've got an average intensity of 75%, but it's not a normal distribution, it's like way
mm,
skewed heavy and super light, then that's not necessarily where you want to be, right? So you want to look at the average, but then the distribution of that volume across different intensity zones. And then finally compare all of those to your total. So the Russians called it like the coefficient of intensity, but basically look at all of your training volume in comparison to your total and it gives you a glimpse into like, are you training really heavy? Like, do you train with much heavier loads than most people, or do you train, in this sort of similar range that the average individual does? And those will give you snapshots into more of like, you know, how hard are you training, how heavy are you training, what is the general sort of like distribution of that, so you're not like just doing all heavy lifts and all light lifts, and then you can do stuff with that information and guide your training.
yeah. That was
Yeah,
a great answer. That was
yeah,
a perfect answer. The coaching platform will calculate all that stuff for you, so you can just kind of look at the numbers represented over time and make good decisions. And I don't think that obviates the need to know that, like how it's
no,
calculated or why, but I think it's super helpful. So Max, I thought that was one of the best chats we've had in a long time.
that was
Um,
fun. We covered all the important stuff, mostly fingering bullet holes.
yeah, it, you may be next, listener. Max, if people want to hear more of your ramblings, your incoherent ramblings about this platform you've spent months and months developing, where can they go to find that?
uh Oh man, check out. Well, I'm obviously the Coachlogik Instagram. Sorry, Coachlogik Mentorship. And then you can check out anything on my Instagram. I sometimes post on there every couple of years. And then yeah, check out any of the podcasts we do. The Coachlogik
Yeah,
podcast on
totally.
YouTube. Check out Josh's podcast, the Philosophical
Yeah,
Weightlifting Podcast. We talk about a lot there. And then show up to nationals. We'll be there. We'll be demoing some of the product, showing people how it works, what's going on, and yeah, that's what I would do.
yeah. I do post more frequently on Instagram if you're interested. I did put a nice little, actually like a pretty well formatted picture about saving your beliefs for church, not for science, because we empirically test hypotheses. So if you want to follow me, that's Josh_Phil WL on Instagram. Philosophical weightlifting everywhere else. Max, pleasure as always.
Yeah.
We will catch you all next time.